What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our weekly talk show. We have an awesome episode lined up here today. We have a special guest that we're excited to have on, our second special guest, and we're in the midst of conference tournaments. There's already been some exciting games and a lot of exciting ones to come up, and we have the selection show on Sunday night, which we'll be going live for as well. And with that, I'm Deemer Class and excited to welcome Stephen and Matt back to the show. And guys, we've got a great week planned and a great session planned, and looking forward to chopping it up.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning. How are we doing?
Doing well. How are you guys? I think last night, one of the better Thursday nights of lacrosse. A lot of games going on. We have a huge schedule today. I think this is turning into, it's obviously usually one of the more exciting times of the year, but I think this year in particular, there's a lot of parity going on right now.
Yeah, I think last night, to your point, really adds to a lot of it. When you're looking at a few of the games where you're not having necessarily, you never know, like Big Ten tournament, for example, but you're not having the traditional, higher seeds just winning, which for the at-large and automatic qualifier stuff really throws some wrinkles into everything.
Yeah, definitely. And just to go through for anyone that maybe didn't get the chance to catch some of the games in the Big Ten tournament, Penn State beat Maryland 19-9. Michigan beat Hopkins 10-7. So both of those were upsets. So the 3 and 4 seed are going to be playing each other in a championship game. I think Hopkins is safe. We can talk about that later, along with kind of what the outlook is for Maryland. A10 semifinals, we have Richmond over High Point and St. Joe's over UMass. Big East semifinals, 2 huge games there, almost 2 huge upsets. The first one, Villanova upset Denver 10-9. I don't know if you guys were able to catch that game or catch the end. Crazy ending, and some people are talking about a controversial crease call. I personally don't think it was a goal. And then we had Georgetown winning in overtime against Providence. They won 14-13. So just a handful of games there. I know there were some great games in the America East as well. CAA semifinals were going on, and MAC. So a lot of lacrosse right now, but some great games across the board.
We had practice, but I was watching the highlights this morning. What was controversial about that call?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
Everybody just does this now because it's the goal mouth, and it's the rule. Like there is no push.
Exactly.
You go right into the goalie. People just don't like the rule. It's not. I get what you're saying, Steve, because people make things about it, but there wasn't like really controversial, was it?
Yeah, no, I saw things on Twitter, and then one of my group chats, people were talking about how like, oh, that could have been a goal. And then I went and watched the replay. I mean, he kind of jumped right into the goalie.
Right into the goalie. Like
the easiest crease call, I think, of the year in a crunch time play. I don't even think it would have to go to review.
No, I mean, it sucks because like you got a really pretty decent opportunity with like a second left, but
well, he could have finished at the top of the crease,
Well, that's the whole point. Like if you know the rule, which everybody does, then you have to adjust 5 steps before you get to that point to make sure you don't end up in the goal mouth.
Yeah, I'm sure he just felt like he was running out of time. Like I was trying to think about it from his perspective. Like he didn't realize he might have had 2 more seconds on the clock. So it's, one of the, and he obviously kind of belly flops on the goalie. But yeah, I mean, I would just say again, back to, and we've had this debate before about social media and lacrosse, but when you make it sound like it's so controversial, the call itself is not controversial. It makes it confusing to the fans and the people from afar who are actually trying to be like, oh, what's controversial about this? The controversy is that people disagree on the rule, and I think people need to do a better job of differentiating that, because these clickbait headlines to say this is such a controversial call, there's nothing controversial about the call, the review. Like he lands on the goalie, touches the goal mouth, like just separate that. It's just, it is a little frustrating because you see a lot of people who don't know the sport as well get very confused.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're spot on. I'm kind of happy to see. I think it stinks for Denver, obviously, that they lost, but Deemer, you were alluding to it before we kind of went live. Nice to see some of these lower seeded teams get some wins here. I think Denver is safe and they're going to make the tournament, so I think we're going to see them again, obviously. So that wasn't the last play of their season. But credit to Villanova. I think they always kind of has a lot of sneaky good players. I think they're a program that's kind of been knocking at the door, but hasn't been able to get over the hump maybe and get into the tournament consistently. But good win for Villanova, and I'm sure they're looking forward to this matchup, which I believe will be on Saturday against Georgetown for the Big East Championship.
I haven't. The Big East is always the conference I'm able to watch the least of the big conferences, just because they're on like Flow TV all year, and it's just the one I haven't ever bitten the bullet on of getting. But watching the highlights of that game, the Licata kid was really impressive. I thought. I don't know how much you guys have gotten to see him play, maybe a lot more than I have. But I'm looking at his stats now: 35 goals and 19 assists on the year. I just thought his name was called like on every big play on the broadcast, and he just looked, impressive, quick dodger, good feeder when I was watching.
Yeah, he's legit. And to your point, I haven't gotten to see that as much of that conference, and I think DU might even have their own streaming subscription network. So, but Licata, I just saw some glimpses of like a John Clue, Mike Sowers combo. Like I'm sure he was spinning their highlight tapes on repeat growing up. So I saw a little bit of both of those guys in that, split to swim move back at X.
Yeah,
that's a high compliment there.
John Clue, Mike Sowers combo.
Well, I think it's a high compliment, but it's more, like I'm not saying he's those guys. I'm just saying it's a glimpse into what it looks like.
John Clue went viral. I think it was his freshman or sophomore year with the game against Georgetown.
John Clue was a 4-time captain at Villanova.
How long was he there for?
6 years, I think. 7 years.
Could have been 7. Honestly, you could fool me with that one, but
that's all. I think
John. For a while, FCL was the Sans John Clue fan page. We've posted his reels probably once or twice a year. Kind of similar to you, Stephen, before you joined the team. Now we're not going to post about you anymore, but we did post a good amount of your college clips.
I always appreciated it. I did. Thank you. Another player I wanted to point out, I didn't have the time to catch the Delaware Fairfield game, but I was kind of following it, and I was getting some text message updates throughout. Fairfield was up. Delaware ended up coming back and winning the game in overtime. Wanted to shout out Mike Robinson from Delaware. I don't think people watch Delaware as much. They're not usually on ESPNU or ESPN2 or any of those. But Mike Robinson, super, super talented player, scores the game-tying goal and the game winner. He ends the game, I believe, with 3 goals and 1 assist. He's a player I feel like I've seen since, I think 2021 was his freshman year, and he's been making some great plays. Delaware, always sneaky good. Remember in 2022 when they upset Georgetown in that first-round game when Georgetown was a 2 seed. So just wanted another name that popped off to me yesterday.
I was catching up with Trey Wilkes a little bit, the defensive coordinator at Delaware, and he mentioned, I just didn't realize I think they're starting 7. Like basically their whole defense is new, like did not play last year, and they had the number 3 scoring defense in college lacrosse. Now that's very much so like strength of schedule related, but still, I just think to your point, that staff's done a nice job of them consistently, like, new guys in there always seem to be doing a solid job against no matter who they play. And a team that in the last 5 years, you say Delaware, really one of those lower to like 10 to 20 teams that's been consistently like solid in the CAA and just like, holding down the conference, and don't really count them out against those bigger games in the first round of tournament play.
Even early in the year, and I think again they probably had some early losses that took away some media attention for them. But I remember people talking about I believe there was 2 guys going into the season that might have come off of 40 and 40 years last year, I think. And I think JP Ward from Delaware, a McDonough grad, was one of them. And JP, if I remember correctly, was a JV guy as a sophomore at McDonough. And he has had an incredible career at Delaware, being like this quarterback, two-handed, like really fundamental playmaker. And he's really complimented the Canadians they've brought in and some of the downhill dodging middies. So they've got a lot of really nice players on their team. And, if they can get their conference, automatic bid, they'll be a tough out.
I think it's an interesting point you make, the JV as a sophomore, because so many people think that like if you like that, your career is made or broken like as a 15-year-old. But so many players, everybody alludes to like Pat Spencer, right? But there's another great example. Just to continue to develop, like you get recruited your junior year, you could be a totally different player by the time you step on your freshman year of college or your junior year of college. And so just the fact that there's not as much pressure, I think, as people think to be something, at 15 years old when most players haven't even athletically started to develop yet. I just like kind of highlighting that point because it's always so in people's heads that, if I'm not on varsity as a sophomore, like I'll never play, my career's ruined, which is just not the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great point.
I think you're spot on. All right, to move forward here this week, we do have a special guest. Last week, for any of you that tuned in, we had Tim Muller. Wasn't exactly planned, but he was at, I believe he was at Dunn's apartment, and we had a great conversation with him. This week, we planned out our guests a little bit further. We are going to be joined by Matt Kavanagh, former Notre Dame All-American attackman. Obviously, his family is very well known. I'm going to add him here. What's up, Cav? How you doing?
What's up, boys? Can you hear me? Am I all good? All right,
yeah.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I have to give a shout out. Got to give a shout out to Enty with the background.
I was about to say, were you playing some wall ball, Matt?
I know, right?
Just getting some reps.
Better than the blur.
Yeah.
Matt only played left-handed wall ball growing up, not right-handed.
Still working on my right hand.
That'll get there.
Nothing wrong with that.
The underlying theme, and welcome, Matt. We had Tim Muller on last week. We're just going through Chaminade, just one by one, trying to get to Earhart at some point. But that guy's
the big fish you gotta get.
Yeah,
I don't know if he does podcasts.
I don't know. We'll work on him. Now that he's retired, he might have some more time. So we'll see.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But Matt, welcome. It's we've been doing these talk shows every week, and it's been fun to chop it up. And I think for us, like starting to get some guests on, it's been fun for all of us. Matt and I especially obviously have competed with and against you over the years, and you've had an amazing career and run in the sport. And it's really fun now getting to watch your brothers do their thing and at your alma mater. And so, I think for us, just getting to talk shop and hear some of your thoughts on the spring season, is exciting. So obviously, Notre Dame's going into the ACC semis tonight. What's it like for you as a big brother watching these guys? And what are your thoughts going into the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, they've had a good season to date. Obviously, coming off the championship last year, it's kind of hard to replicate that kind of special atmosphere in the locker room and kind of have that continuity. A lot of championship teams have that championship hangover, and they've done a good job of kind of cleaning the slate. I know they got pumped by Princeton in a fall ball game. I think they lost by like 15 goals, and that was kind of a wake up moment. And then obviously, earlier this year, they lost to Georgetown in overtime, and that was another one to kind of kick them into gear, and they haven't missed a beat since then. But they're playing really well. I mean, their lineup, up and down the lineup, guys are contributing, guys stepping up. But it's good. It's a unique position for them to kind of be the hunted. They've always been, just trying to scrape and get into the Final Four and break through for that championship. But now being the defending champs. They got a target on their back, but I think they've kind of embraced that and just taking it one game at a time. But it's interesting, right? This ACC tournament, there's no AQ, so there's not much to be playing for in terms of like an automatic qualifier. But I think there still is a lot to play for, especially the 4 teams in it are in the top 5. So it could be a little preview of championship weekend. So kind of mentally preparing for what it takes to get over the hump in terms of Memorial Day. So it should be good. I mean, I know we were texting last night about all the games. It's a crazy time for lacrosse, so it's exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm thinking with the one obvious challenge here, I think, is like Notre Dame and UVA just played each other, right?
Yeah.
So I think, man, I can't really remember exactly how it worked out, but we had a stretch, I think, our sophomore years where Maryland and Notre Dame played 3 times in a season. That is one of the things I think about adding the ACC tournament is now these teams potentially could play 3 times in a season, which adds a unique element to it. How do you feel about these guys going into UVA, a week after just competing against them in obviously a tough game like that?
Yeah, well, going to your point, that 2014 ACC tournament, that was the only year that the ACC had an AQ because Maryland was still in the ACC. And actually, we had to win the ACC tournament basically to get in. I think we were like 7-6. We had just come off a loss from you guys the week before in South Bend.
Yeah,
and then we won late in that game, and then ended up winning the ACC tournament. So we actually had to win that. I don't think the stakes are as high for any teams going into this tournament, but the back-to-back games, I think it's easier for the teams to kind of prepare if they already went through the scouting report the week before. So it's just, I mean, in my opinion, it's just about kind of tweaking things. I know UVA had a ton of turnovers in that game, still only lost by 2. So I think it's going to be another tight game. But I don't think it's as bad as having to prepare for a team that you haven't seen before or recently. I think it's a little bit easier for these coaching staff to kind of tweak things, smaller things, and kind of adjust from there. But yeah, UVA and Notre Dame played 3 times last year, and that was the biggest thing. They lost twice in the regular season, and then finally broke through in the Final Four. But a lot of those scouting reports are easier when you know your opponent and their tendencies. I remember Coach Corrigan made a comment after Notre Dame beat UVA in the Final Four, and it was after the Duke and Penn State game with the controversial ending and all that. But he was like, I'm kind of happy it's Duke because we know them so well, so we don't have to go through a whole in-depth scouting report as opposed to playing Penn State. I don't remember the last time Notre Dame's played Penn State, at least recently. So you got to go through a whole new list of guys and work on, see their tendencies, and seeing them for the first time. It's a little bit easier on that short rest of, knowing personnel and knowing tendencies, where you can kind of game plan for that a little bit easier.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you were talking earlier about it's not as high stakes, I think, for Notre Dame going into this ACC tournament. But just generally speaking, there hasn't been an ACC tournament since 2019. 2020, it was obviously canceled. 21, it didn't exist. 22, it didn't exist. And last year, I don't think it existed either. So I think it's pretty nice for the ACC as a whole to get to do this and get to play in that tournament style, especially. It's a very good replication of what a Final Four will look like or can look like. So I think really excited for that. One thing I wanted to ask you about from last week, and just if you have any kind of insider knowledge on it, and Matt, I'm sure you would love to comment on this as well, but watching Sean Light on Notre Dame, the defender, I think he did a great job against Schellenberger. I was able to catch most of that game. Anything that you just noticed from him or hear from maybe your brothers? Matt, I know we've done some breakdowns on him, but I feel like he's still almost underrated here throughout the country and in the national conversation, but I think he is clearly one of the best defenders in the country right now.
Yeah, he's really fun to watch. I think he's so fundamentally sound where he doesn't throw any crazy takeaway checks, where he's not like flashy like that. But I think he can match feet with really any sort of attackman body type, whether it's like a smaller, quicker guy or kind of a bigger guy. I know they didn't put him on O'Neal in their first matchup against Duke, but you know, I would love to see that matchup to see how he handles a bigger body attackman. But yeah, he's really fun to watch. He's good off the ground. He has a good stick. He can kind of push transition. I haven't seen it that much from him, but I mean, he's only a freshman, so he still seems like he's so raw with so much room for growth. But I think fundamentally, he's right there with some of the best in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I met him a couple of times throughout the recruiting process, and he came to Jules Henningsberg's Mission Prime event last year that we worked. So I got to know him pretty well there, and I talked to Coach Wellner about him this fall. And I think the thing that stands out about him, at least to me, obviously he's like big, athletic. He was so coachable and focused, and I think to be a successful player as a freshman at that level, defensively at Notre Dame in the ACC, the mental side of it's huge. And I just think you watch him now, like he fits right into the flow of the defense, on the ball, off the ball. Like covering Connor Schellenberger isn't a go stand at X and move your feet with him type of game. Like he's moving off the ball. They're picking for him. You're approaching the ball over and over. And I think you forget that Sean Light's a freshman when you watch him play, which is a huge compliment for a defender. And then reframing that and being like, that guy's going to have an incredible career. But I think he is one of the best defenders in the country as a freshman right now. And covering Connor Schellenberger well is a challenge that very few guys do successfully. So I've been very impressed with him. And obviously a pretty young Notre Dame defense this year was probably a question mark going into the season, I would guess.
Yeah, he from what I've heard from Pat and Chris, and I've spoke to Coach Wellner as well, like he's just such, you know, a focused kid and so dialed in on the process, and just being a freshman in the Notre Dame defense is, you know, complex in and of itself, where it's hard to grasp those concepts early. It kind of takes some time to kind of learn all the complexities of the Notre Dame defense, and being a day one starter, that speaks volumes of, you know, how coachable he is and how well he can digest information and you know, slot in there seamlessly. So he's been a day one starter. And I feel like each week that goes by, his confidence grows, and he knows that he can kind of match up with those top guys. So it's really fun to watch. He's a great player.
I would just add in there, and I agree with Matt, you know, remembering about the coachability piece, and obviously Matt was more hands-on from a defensive side, but I just also remember, you know, his presence was confident, but very humble and eager to learn. Like he didn't ever walk around like he knew everything or he was a top ranked defenseman. And I think, you know, we all can attest to, which I think is getting harder for kids nowadays with social media and how much, you know, guys are getting hyped up. But even back to our days of, you know, recruiting in high school and beyond, you know, you can be a really good high school player and it not get there, you know, on the college level. And so, you know, I think, you know, if there were a way to kind of push kids to carry themselves, it's to err on the side of being a little more humble and understated and really earning your stripes versus coming in thinking that, you know, you know it all and you really got it going on. Because I think we all know, like, there's a huge adjustment when you get to college, you know, and it seems like he's really taken that in stride, which is cool to see.
Absolutely. I know we got right into the Notre Dame stuff there, but we did want to kind of loop back because Matt, you were pinging over text. You were watching all the games last night. Any major impressions from you from the conference tournament play last night?
I mean, there was a few. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the seeding all breaks down, especially after the conference champions are named. I think, you know, from 1 to 10, maybe 1 to 12, those are going to be really tough quarterfinal matchups, regardless of seed. I think it's just it'll be interesting to see how those shake out and see if there are bid stealers. That Michigan game last night was interesting. I turned it on when it was 6-1 Hopkins and thought they were going to run away with it. And then they scored one goal the rest of the game. It it kind of seems like their offense over the last few weeks has just kind of sputtered a little bit. Their defense is incredible. Chase Ireland is an incredible goaltender, but they haven't matched it with the offense. So it'll be interesting to see where they kind of land. I think they're going to be a top 5 seed regardless of what happens. But yeah, I mean, they've been a team that's been up there all year. And it just seems like the last few weeks, their offense really hasn't matched the defensive output from them to put them over the top. And then Penn State on the opposite side of that Big Ten bracket, their offense is incredible. They move the ball. They have, parts all around that is kind of hard to match up against. And then TJ Malone is a great player who moves the ball and can score without the ball too. So they're a really fun team to watch and pretty tough to defend.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think Hopkins, the one big blip for them, I guess, is that Navy game, a little earlier on, but otherwise I think they've had a very solid year. For the Big Ten now with Michigan beating Hopkins, Penn State beating Maryland, you're looking at a pretty interesting slate where Maryland now loses 19-9 to Penn State in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. If Michigan probably was on the outside, but with their win, depending on what happens in the tournament, now you got a Hopkins, a Penn State, a Michigan, and then how many Big Ten teams do you realistically get into the tournament this year?
Yeah.
Probably 3.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, that Michigan game. Look, they did the same thing last year. They went in and won that tournament and then won a first round game. So they kind of have that experience. They have a lot of guys back from that team and then brought in a bunch of transfers, a couple from Princeton, Rhonda and Pedersen. And then Tiernan on the inside is great. Compliment to Bame. So they have the pieces to win it again, which would be pretty funny. But I thought that game last night, the Providence-Georgetown game, if Providence had won that game, a Big East final of Nova and Providence would have been epic. And that would have really sent things off into who knows what would have happened with all the bubble teams if the Big East final was Providence and Nova. That would have messed everything up.
If Denver and Georgetown are both out of the final.
Yeah, I think
it would have felt more like a Big East. It would have felt more like a Big East, basketball tournament versus Denver just being randomly thrown in there.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and speaking of seedings, does Big Ten get 3? Does Big Ten get 2? But then now Big East, I think this is the first time we've really been considering, could the Big East get 3 teams? I think that there's still a two-team league. I think the winner and then Georgetown will get in, the winner and Denver will get in. But with Georgetown's resume, will be interesting to see. I think a lot of that's also going to rely on how this Ivy League tournament shakes out, which also begins tonight. So there's a lot left on the table here. As I was saying when we opened up, I think one of the more exciting Thursday night conference semifinal times that we've had in the game right now. So it's been great all around. And then if we want to move forward, I know, Matt, we kind of each brought some topics or some questions for you, just general themes around different things that we wanted to ask you. I can go first here. Just taking a look at Notre Dame, and obviously your brothers. I think your brothers are the headliners with the team along with Entenmann. I feel like I hear the Kavanagh brothers a lot referring to Pat and to Chris. Pat obviously has had a phenomenal career. I think 2-time Thornton finalist. Chris now, he is a junior. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Chris. Taking a look at the leading point scorers, Pat is leading the way with 53 points. Chris has 50 points. Chris is a balanced 26 goals, 24 assists. We have been talking a little bit about the top 25 Thornton nominees and some snubs there. I don't see Chris on that list. I kind of wanted to just talk with you about what you see from him. I think maybe what we can see from him in the future here. I think it's going to be fun to kind of watch him on his own in the sense of he's going to get some more notoriety, some more attention that I think he's very deserving of. So just wanted to kind of pick your brain there. Obviously, he's had a tremendous career, got a national championship. He's an All-American, but I still think he's underrated.
Yeah, I mean, so do I. But yeah, they kind of go like hand in hand, and Pat being the older one and more experienced, he kind of gets more of the notoriety. But Chris is a very unique player. A lot of similar traits to Pat, but also like way different. He's an incredible outside shooter, and he's an underrated passer as well. And he hasn't been asked to do that as much in his first 3 years, just because playing with Pat, he kind of leads the charge there. But I think he's well equipped to kind of be that quarterback. You know, you kind of see it. A lot of teams recently have been locking off Pat on the man up, and Chris can kind of seamlessly run the point on the man up, and they haven't skipped a beat. So, I mean, that's just one example, but I think they're similar in the sense that the way they play and attack the game, you know, constantly, their motor is pretty special to watch. It's just fun, you know. Even when they're having a bad day, there's still that like sense of anything can happen in terms of like chaos or just getting to the cage and creating something out of nothing. But yeah, he wasn't on that Twerton list. I mean, I don't think that really matters. I thought the kid Peyton Cormier should have been on it as well. Like they're two of the top attackmen in the country. It's, you know, it's interesting. I don't know who really how that list gets broken down, but yeah, it's funny to watch. But yeah, I think it's gonna suck not watching Pat and Chris together next year. But I'm also really excited to watch how Chris kind of develops into his own and kind of leads by himself. Not by himself, but like, you know, being alone without Pat. You know, it's just like Pat and Chris. They always seem like they're one person out there.
Yeah.
But they're two totally different players, but also very similar. I know I'm like talking in circles, but I'm excited to kind of see how that develops. But I'm also excited to see how this end of the year wraps up and see if they can make another run at it.
Did you get to watch them play together at Taft?
They never played together at Taft.
They didn't.
Yeah, Pat did a PG year there, and then Chris went there the following year to play his junior and senior year. But it was during COVID, so I don't even think he played his junior year. I think he only played his senior year. But it's funny, Jeffrey Ricciardelli, who's on their attack line and man up, he was a sophomore when Pat PG'd at Taft, so they played together. And then Chris got to play a few years with him, and he was originally committed to Penn, and I think playing with both Pat and Chris kind of swayed his decision to go to Notre Dame, which is kind of epic. He's a great player.
I sat with his dad on the plane ride back to New York after the Duke Notre Dame game, Mr. Ricciardelli, and it was fun to just, you know, it's always fun like when you're in the sport, like hearing people's backstories and who played with who and playing the name game. And so he was talking a little bit about that. And that's something that I've really enjoyed watching. You know, I think the Notre Dame man up unit, you know, the last 2 seasons, but probably longer, but the last 2 this year and last year really stick out to me as just their effectiveness and, you know, using Taylor, and then Ricciardelli's kind of been a man up specialist. And then your brothers, I think, have tremendous vision throwing it inside and skip passes to the pipe. It's cool to see that connection, you know, and I think that trust and that chemistry, even that one against, you know, Notre Dame, Virginia, I think, you know, one of them fires that skip, you know, that really wasn't that open, you know, and I think that trust and chemistry makes all the difference.
Yeah, they have a really special unit, all different parts, but they all work together, and there's been a lot of continuity over the last 3 years. And even adding a guy like Devin McClain, who was a quarterback at Brown, and then you just add him in to be kind of a chameleon on that offense where he can both, you know, shoot from the outside, he can finish the ball inside off cuts, but also has great vision. Just adding another piece like that has been incredible. But they also have the shooters on the outside and then guys who can finish inside. I don't know what their percentage is right now, and I don't know how they calculate, you know, the end of the year statistics, but it's got to be the best man up unit of all time right now. I think it's over like 72% right now.
I think they're like 73 or 74%. I was looking at it the other day.
Yeah, it's honestly insane. But the best thing about it, they don't run any like set plays. They just run a 3-3 and just move the ball. And teams can't really stop it. And then they'll try and lock guys off. They try and lock Jake off inside. They'll try and lock Pat off. I don't think they've tried to lock Dobson off. He hasn't really scored that many this year, but he's still deadly from outside. But I don't know. It's kind of pick your poison with that man up unit and kind of hope that, someone either misses the net or a goalie makes a save, but they're going to get a shot up and going to get a good look regardless of what the defense throws at them. UVA does, have the length on the outside where they can cover a little bit more ground. I was surprised to see them kind of lock off Pat.
I was too. Especially there was like a minute penalty where they just locked the whole. That's hard to play a 4-man for a minute against. Yeah.
So I mean, that's just one of those things going back to the scouting and playing on a short week against the same team. Like I'm sure we'll see some sort of wrinkle on the man up and see how they approach that differently this week.
Yeah.
Well, I'll piggyback on that because one of the things I wanted to ask is again obviously more brother focused, and I know Matt wants to talk a little more about coach, but I think and you and I have texted my sister's a senior at Michigan. We obviously we've all played, so you can remember those days as a player, and how emotional it was. What's it like for you as a brother watching these games? It's your alma mater, so you've obviously got that connection, right? Anytime I go to a Duke game, I'm like, I can't help but I'm feeling it, when I was in the stands for the finals last year, it's tough. But you've got that extra layer with both of your brothers there. What's the emotion like when you're watching these games and you're traveling to these games and that experience?
I mean, it's awesome. I'm really lucky to be able to watch them. I mean, I'll always watch Notre Dame lacrosse, but having two brothers on the team makes it even more special. And then knowing them and then knowing their friends and teammates on the team now, there's special connections formed, and really getting to know them on a personal level, it makes it even more special. It's fun, especially, even knowing the coaching staff and riders on the staff and knowing Coach Corrigan. It's great. The alumni is special in a sense where we had a dinner when Notre Dame played Cornell on Long Island. We had a dinner the night before with the team, and a ton of alumni came, and Mark Pasquale was talking and thanking Coach for letting all the old guys come and crash dinner. But guys from the 80s were back there, and there's basically 4 decades of guys who have all had the same experience with Coach. So they know what it's like being whoever the 18-year-old freshman is right now who's getting chewed out by Coach Corrigan. Like a guy who's in his 50s right now has lived that same experience. So it's kind of a cool shared bond that all of the alumni have, and it's really special. But it's fun watching my brothers play. I think it's more stressful watching them than actually playing games in the PLL right now. I get more nervous watching them play. I'd much rather be just playing the game and not thinking about it, and not having any control over the game or situation. Yeah. But they play at a high level where it's they make it fun to watch.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. My brother played at Richmond, and I remember watching those games, and watching is so much worse than playing them. We went to his quarterfinal game against Penn. They lost by 1, and I watching the game is the worst thing in the world. Playing's not that big of a deal once you're in it. You're in the zone. Watching is terrible. Matt, mine just piggybacking off of that. You mentioned, because I was kind of curious to your point. I've met Coach Corrigan before. I've spoken to him on the phone once. But the stability of the Notre Dame program obviously is Coach Corrigan. I'm a Maryland fan, but it did feel good to see him win a championship when a guy puts that much into a program, and to see that pay off. But I'm curious from your perspective, I think there's a little bit of mystery to him, just maybe the part that he's been at Notre Dame for so long. Notre Dame's a little bit isolated geographically, and does Coach Corrigan have a secret sauce? What is it about him, the program he runs, that has led to Notre Dame's success and that strong alumni tie you're talking about?
I I mean, yeah, I guess there is some sort of like mystery behind it. I think he really takes pride in just being like a well, coached team and drilling like basics, and that starts day one every year. Like every year is a new slate. So you talk to guys, we do the same basic things over and over and over and over every day in practice. But just having that sense of trust with your teammates in certain situations. I talk to guys I work with, like practicing at a really high level. Coach Corrigan, he makes our practices or used to. I'm sure he still does now. Like our practices were way harder than the games ever would be, just because when it got to game day, we were in those certain situations where it wasn't like a foreign situation to us, where we didn't know how to react and handle. And he got on guys a lot, but when he does get on guys, it's kind of a teaching moment, so guys don't make the same mistake twice. So don't feel special if he's chewing you out. But yeah, I mean, he's all about the basics, the fundamentals, and I mean, it has sustained success. But yeah, it really was good seeing him get over the hump after a ton of heartbreak over the years. But after getting that one, it kind of seems like the recruits have been stacking up. The sustained success is coming, where like I wouldn't be surprised if there was more on the way, which would be kind of awesome to see after him sticking out 36 plus years, where he's getting a little bit older and a little bit more mellow. So it's really cool to see. But his coaching staff is great too, and he lets them kind of do their own thing as well. Coach Wojcik and Coach Wellner have done a great job, and Coach Garnsey as well. So
yeah, that's what I was going to kind of ask, because like I think obviously in our time, like the Notre Dame defense was like a big thing, and Coach Byrne was there, and I was always curious as to how different head coaches and coordinators handle it differently. How influential like Coach Corrigan was in the defense or on the offensive side of the ball, or if he was more of like that head coaching figure that made sure practice ran well, the culture was good, guys were going hard and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he has final decision on everything. Technique wise, Coach Byrne would drill guys down, communication, everything like that. But during scouting and everything like that, Coach Corrigan was making the calls. I'm curious to know how it is now. I think on both sides of the ball, to be totally honest, offense and defense. But he lets his coordinators, work with the guys and kind of implement certain things. But Coach Corrigan's got final say on and sign off on most things in the program.
Last piece, because there's a trend going on lacrosse now, where coaches coach for a long time in college and they go to the PLL in their in their early 70s. Is Coach Corrigan going to be a PLL coach in the next 6 years?
That would be awesome. I would love to see him coach pro. I don't know. That would be pretty interesting. I haven't really talked to him about it. I haven't talked to him about how many more years he has left. I think he's still got a long way to go at Notre Dame. I don't really see a time where he steps down. It would be a sad day whenever that time does come. But yeah, I would love to see him coach in the PLL. It's just he's all about strategy and adapting. It probably took him a little bit longer to adapt to a more up-tempo game with the shot clock, but I think he's gotten there. I know a lot of his teams have traditionally been a little bit slow it down, play solid defense, and score a few goals here and there, but they've really upped it with the introduction of the shot clock. But he's a great coach, and I think great coaches can kind of adapt to any sort of situation, whether it's college or pro. So I think that would be pretty cool to see him if he ever wanted to throw his name in the ring to be a PLL coach. But hopefully there's a little bit more expansion and more teams and more opportunities in the PLL for that to happen.
I miss your guys' 5-4 battles.
That was the Maryland Notre Dame staple.
Now every Notre Dame game is like 15-14, 15-13. Too much scoring,
I think the year before I got there, I think they lost to Penn State 3-2 at Arlotta. So that's like a famous game in Notre Dame history.
Oh my gosh.
3-2. I think we had 6-5 a couple of times maybe, and like after us there might have been a 5-4, but 3-2 is something else.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Well, that's all great to hear. I think with Corrigan, at least from the outsider, I feel like what you see is what you get with him, which I think I've always appreciated. And it sounds like a lot of those guys from Notre Dame do as well. Looking forward to tonight. And Matt, we don't want to keep you on for too long, but obviously we have the ACC championship. So UVA is playing Notre Dame at 5 p.m. tonight on the ACC network. Syracuse plays Duke at 8 p.m. on the ACC network. Obviously, these are both rematches from this season. Notre Dame beat UVA last weekend, and back in March 20th, Syracuse beat Duke 10-4. So I think UVA is going to be looking for some revenge, as well as Duke. I know we talked a little bit about the Notre Dame UVA game. Would love if you have any further thoughts. That's great. I think one thing I'm looking for in just monitoring all these other conferences, UVA is on a skid here. I think they've lost their last 3. I think they're in a situation where there's a chance that they could miss out on the tournament. So this also is a huge game for them. I don't think they will miss the tournament, but if everything goes wrong, there's always a possibility. So never know what can happen, but that's something that I wanted to point out. I think it'd be a great game. A lot of high-level matchups, obviously, with Pat, your brother, and Schellenberger, I think, two Wharton finalists, and I think they both will be again. And then Syracuse, Duke, obviously a lot of great talent there. So any thoughts that you guys have on these games or this tournament as a whole? I think we're all really looking forward to this one.
I think for me, we talked a little about Notre Dame UVA. I just want to see if that Duke Syracuse last game was real or not, like that 10-4 game. Syracuse has been like at the beginning of the year, I was like, they're talented, but they beat Duke 10-4. That was the most definitive, statement game I saw from them. And then they stick with UVA in that 18-17. And so for me, it's kind of like, I think at the beginning of the year, Notre Dame, Duke, and UVA were like top 3 and everybody else was second tier. Syracuse has really earned the right to be above that, but a part of me still wonders how real is some of that with them. And I think this would be a big test for them. If they do it again to Duke or even just win the game in a close fashion, like it's a real big statement for Syracuse, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Syracuse is real for sure. I would say, from that last game, I think Duke has a lot to prove based on that first outing. And, one thing that I just remember feeling that was lacking, especially from that game, was McAdory initiating. And I think he's a huge piece to the puzzle, and he needs to come out of the box and draw slides. And so I think if he can do that consistently and they give him those opportunities, I think they're going to be on their way to, just being able to create some good looks versus I think last time they played just had too many low angle shots and let Mark get hot and gave him a career day. And he's a talented goalie. But I think if they can, have McAdory and some of these other middies initiate more and draw and get the ball moving, I think that allows the Zawada, to look for Dyson, look for skip passes, and allows O'Neal to initiate off of short dodges versus him initiating off of long dodges. And I think that's a key to his game as well that's not talked about. And that's what I would say if you were to dig into the differences of Brennan versus Pat versus Schellenberger. I just think Pat and Schellenberger are a little more like initiate off of their dodge kind of guys, whereas I think Brennan really thrives off of like the short dodge, like someone starts the party and then it hits him on the backside. And it's just different, right? I just think people have to understand like schematically, like that's where there are differences, in some of the players and how you're going to use them, right? So I think if McAdory can do that, I think that will lead to success for Duke.
I agree. Cuse is really fun to watch, and they've kind of turned it up the last few weeks. What makes them hard, though, is their depth at midfield. And Deemer, you touched on it. Guys getting the ball moving and getting started. The same could probably be said for Spallina a little bit, is getting the ball at a ball movement as opposed to those long dodges. He's had some trouble in the ACC against some of these tougher matchups. If he can get into better spots and kind of get to a spot where he doesn't have to take that long dodge, he'll probably have a little bit more success. But Cuse putting up 18 goals without Joey Spallina having any points, that's a win. But you want to see him get more involved. For as good of a player he is, that's kind of tough getting kind of blanketed like that in some of these games. So I'm sure he's not happy about it. But I think similar to O'Neill, if he can get into certain situations and getting the ball out of ball movement as opposed to being the guy that's starting everything up, I think he'll find a little bit more success. I think that game is going to be fun. I don't think it's going to be the same result as that game in the Dome, as a midweek game in March. Hopefully it'll be beautiful weather outside and the guys will be ripping up and down the field. I think that's going to be a pretty high scoring game and pretty exciting. I love the way Syracuse plays. And I guess that's just a brand of lacrosse that is Syracuse lacrosse. Steve, you could probably speak on that a little bit more, but I love the way those guys play and move the ball and kind of, create for themselves and also share the ball at a really high level. So they're a pretty fun team to watch. I would love to see another Notre Dame Syracuse matchup. I was at the game in South Bend where Notre Dame was up a little bit early and Cuse kind of clawed back. So it wasn't as close to the game as the final score showed, but they're still like right there. And I think they have a lot more room to grow in terms of finishing games. I think that's been kind of an Achilles heel for them over the course of this year. So I guess it's crunch time now with these conference tournaments coming up and the ACC and the NCAA tournament coming up. So I'm curious to see how they take that next step, because I do think they're a Final Four team.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with everything. I think this game will definitely be closer than that first one. I think just there's more at stake here. These teams are more mature. I think taking a look at Syracuse, I think they are super fun to watch. I think they are really loaded top to bottom. I think they've had a lot of issues at the Faceoff X before this year, and now they have two great faceoff guys with the Tufts transfer and the freshman. And then I think just taking a look at that last game, the main thing that stood out for me was Will Mark. I think he was really making the Duke shooters second guess themselves. I think Brennan was 1 for 11, and he wasn't the only one that was missing. But a lot of the shots felt like they weren't even going to be on cage, just from an overthinking standpoint. I think when looking at the Syracuse offense, I think they are so loaded, especially at the midfield. I think they kind of have a first line, like a 1A and a 1B. I think both have a lot of strengths. I think having Jake Stevens and Sam English come over from Princeton, those two have been really instrumental in their success. I think, especially when you look at that last game against Virginia, those two were making those big plays down the stretch, along with Owen Hilt, who I think is almost underrated in his own way. So I think that would be a great game to watch. I think speaking to the Syracuse way that they've been playing, I think it definitely feels like kind of the Syracuse way and playing that up and down style. Once again, I think they're able to really do that this year and flourish because of who they have everywhere on the field. And then you take a look, I didn't even mention Billy Juan, who's having a great year, and he's the number 2 cover guy, right? Then you got Riley Figueres, who's the number 1 cover guy. That's a freshman and a sophomore. So really just key staples. And I think can't go without mentioning Odirna, the new defensive coordinator. I think he's done a fantastic job for Syracuse as well. So really looking forward to that game. ACC championship or ACC tournament, always super exciting. And like I was alluding to earlier, excited that it's back in play here. Also tonight on ESPNU is the Ivy League championship. So this is at Cornell. Cornell is the host. They are the 1 seed. Yale is going to be playing Princeton at 6 p.m. and Cornell is going to be playing Penn at 8:30. Looking at the Yale Princeton game, they played last week. Princeton won 15-8. I did not get a chance to catch this, but just from reading things and talking with different people, I think Yale's Fogo has been injured. Obviously, Matt Brandow, Deemer, you've been really high on him this entire season. I love the Princeton attack, even though I think Kabiri and Burns combined for 1 point last week in the win. So kind of what you were saying earlier with Spallina not having a ton of points and Syracuse being able to beat Virginia, I think looking at this Princeton win from last week and 2 of their top freshmen not really contributing from a points perspective, and they still run away with this game 15-8. Excited for this one, and I think Yale has been knocking on the door this year, kind of getting themselves back into that top 5, top 7 conversation nationally. And I think this will be a great game and a great Ivy tournament.
That gap's not going to be 7 goals again, and I think you have to. It's kind of, I would say, also a really good coaching matchup. I think both Yale and Princeton coaching staffs are deep and talented, and they scheme really well. So, I think it'll just be interesting to see what they throw at each other. I also think there's, and I'm not saying that this was the case for them, but I do think there's an element of when you're finishing your conference regular season play, knowing that you're probably going to see a team again. Sometimes I think there's an element of not showing all your stuff before the conference tournament. And I'm not saying that that's why Yale lost, but just to tie it back to Stephen, when you and I were watching the BC Cuse women's game, and I was talking about that zone look that I was wanting them to see that they did a lot last year, they didn't do it at all in that regular season game. And then Martello scores on it in the conference championship, so it's just little things like that I would be interested to watch for. And I think Andy Shea's, done a great job with that program. So, those guys are going to be fired up to get some revenge on Princeton.
Got to give a shout out to Coach Mitchell at Princeton. He's our offensive coordinator for the Cannons, and he does such a good job. So knowing kind of the sets he runs and how he implements some of his philosophies, it's fun to watch them because we run a lot of the same stuff. But he's very tactical in how he runs things from a week to week standpoint. So I'm sure there's going to be some sort of, integration into that, something new. But I think you got to give Matt Brandau a lot of props for what he's done this year, putting up the season that he's had without 2 of his starting line mates, with Lyons and Johnson out for the entire year. It's really impressive. It just seems like they're kind of wearing down a little bit with, how many injuries are kind of starting to add up, especially at the face-off X, and their defense has kind of been a little bit of Swiss cheese over the last few years. And if they don't have those extra possessions, it seems like, it's a tough battle to climb out of. I don't know if we want to switch to the next game, but Cornell, I think Cornell, I'm biased. I think Notre Dame has the best top 6 in the country. I think Cornell is right under them with their weapons that they have.
Yeah.
So dynamic in the way that they can, attack you in so many different ways. I remember watching the Notre Dame Cornell game, and I was just like, what is happening? They kept getting switches for CJ Kurse. They kept getting switches for Michael Long. Firth was getting shorties. The kid Goldstein, the freshman, it's just wave after wave. And then they have the righty hammer with Hugh Kelleher. They just can hit you in so many different ways where it's so hard to defend. They're so fun to watch. And I think they're one of the most dangerous teams in the country right now. I have them winning the Ivy tournament. I think I'd be pretty shocked if they don't, especially with the tournament being up in Ithaca on their home field. I just think the way that they play offense and how hard they play, Coach Busick really has those guys firing. So many of their games, they're just never out of it, and they never quit. So I really love that about them. And then CJ Kurse, I think, is playing some of the best lacrosse right now, and he's so fun to watch. But their top 6 is really dangerous. You could put it up against any top 6 in the country, honestly. That's the most dangerous offense. So a lot of weapons, a lot of choices. It's kind of a pick your poison type. So they're really fun to watch. I mean, Penn got them earlier in the year though, and I think it was double overtime, triple over. I forget what it was. It was an overtime. So they're probably a confident bunch going in, but I think having the home field advantage, I think they're undefeated on their home field. So that should be a fun one. But I'm a big fan of Cornell and Connor Busick and kind of their philosophies and just how they play the game. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. When this game happened back on March 30th, Penn did win 11-10. Taking a look at Cornell's offense, you have CJ Kurse with 66 points, and then Michael Lawn with 60 points. Michael Lawn is leading the team in assists. Those two are seniors, and then their two freshmen are their next leading point scorers with Willem Firth and Ryan Goldstein with 33 and 31 points respectively. Goldstein obviously coming on strong since that Princeton game, which alluding to what you were just saying earlier with kind of Cornell's got that fight in them, and they've been able to come back in games. Watching that Princeton game earlier this year, they had a huge comeback. And then obviously their Syracuse game, another massive comeback. And then watching that Notre Dame game, I was able to catch the end of it. Cornell just never got out of it. Like they kept fighting. And I think that speaks volumes to their culture that I feel like they are all so passionate and strong about, and kind of what Busick and Stevens and Paul Zafari are drilling into them. So I think they're a really dangerous team. I don't think anyone wants to see them come NCAA tournament time. I also have Cornell winning the Ivy League, especially being the host. I know this tournament was played at Columbia, I think the past 2 or 3 years. I think the past 2. But now Cornell is the host. So definitely looking forward to this matchup and this Ivy League tournament.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, to your point, that Cornell anecdotally, you watch that offense, you watch them play, like they're generating shots like crazy. And you could say the same thing about Notre Dame, but just watching that game, like a Cornell versus Notre Dame game usually isn't this crazy, just like shootout. And both teams were just so impressive in not only scoring, but generating scoring opportunities. Cornell, I look at scoring offense right now. Yale actually has one at 15.9 goals a game. Notre Dame's 2 at 15.8 goals a game. Cornell's 3 at 15.54 goals per game. And if you look at Cornell's year, they lost to Penn State with a 9-goal game. They lost, I think, to Penn with a 10-goal game. Everything else is like 14 or more. And so I think they're a fun team to watch, but I agree with you where as long as, they can kind of hold down the possession battle and the defensive side of the ball, like they're going to score goals against anybody. I think they're so deep offensively and can attack you in so many ways. I'm so impressed by both Long and Kurse and a lot of those complimentary guys. So I think I agree. I think Cornell probably favored here for Ivy League tournament. I think Ivy League in general, defenses are down this year for the most part. I think a lot of goals being scored, and I think Cornell has the most high-powered offense.
I do just want to kind of tie, Matt, you were talking about Cornell, talking about Kurst. I want to tie that back to your brother, Pat, especially too. But, we've talked about it on our talk show before. I think early season, we might've been referring to Braden Erksa and how, he's a guy that has a lot of bounce in his step, like a Pat Spencer type, like a Jared Bernhardt type. And right now, I do think 2 of the best Dodgers in the country are Pat and CJ. And one of our athletes actually made a playlist, on our score break of their variability in their dodging, and what's really cool to see. And really a lot of the clips are from that Cornell Notre Dame game. Both of them are dodging from so many different spots. So many changes, speed moves, hesitation moves, bounce moves. Your brother had that sick rocker move last week against UVA. He hit Brower with a similar one at the Duke game. And when you just watch these 2 guys, they're so bouncy. They're so hard to stay with. They're both physical, and they just get shots off, and it's really cool to see. And I do think it's really evolved from the early 2010s and when a lot of us were coming up, where it was all about, make a move and go as hard as you can to get a shot off. The way that their dodging styles have evolved and really, come out to the national stage this year and last year has been really fun to watch.
Yeah, CJ is one of my, besides Pat and Chris, he's probably my favorite player to watch just because of how consistent he can get his own. And that includes all the different ways he does get his own shot. And like you said, like, I think evolving from Pat's kind of a quarterback role, but if you watch a game and kind of like plot out where he starts his dodges, you'd probably get a full circle of the entire offensive zone because he's never, strung into one certain area of the field. He's not just right at X. He's not right on the righty GLE. He's dodging from top left. He's dodging from top right. He's dodging from the wings and dodging from top center. It's so hard for a defense to kind of pinpoint and strategically plan for their slides and their next moves if you're all out of whack and kind of dodging from certain situations. And I think that's kind of, Brennan this year, I don't know how many injuries he's dealing with, and kind of similar to Spallina, where they're kind of starting their offense in the same spot. So it gets a little bit repetitive and a little bit easier for the defenses to kind of be like, all right, here we go. Like, now we know where the two is coming from and we know where to help and this and that. Like, going in different spots is very unpredictable. And I think Pat and CJ do a great job of that. And it also helps being kind of ambidextrous. Pat is a right-handed player, but I think he can dodge and shoot and pass with his left hand just as good as he can with his right hand. So it makes him really hard to defend, but it's also, kind of that unpredictability on offense of just kind of, not freelance, but kind of just taking what the defense gives you and kind of reading and reacting. That gives him that success. But I feel like CJ does that in the same sense, where he can kind of dodge top left and take it down the lefty alley, or he dodges from that top left wing and he can kind of go underneath righty or roll back with his left hand, or he can kind of get someone tripped up at X and come strong side with his left hand. So there's so many, different things that both those guys use, where it's really fun to watch and makes them hard to defend from a team standpoint on defense.
I think that reminds me a little bit of that Duke Notre Dame game where I think Pat scored his first two goals. One was like lefty kind of down the alley, and the other was like righty down like alley low wing, and you look at that as a defensive mind, and you're like, that's challenging, because usually a player can do one of those two things. And on the other side of the field, they're trying to like roll back or do something else. And then, they have to roll back. And so the versatility there from a scouting and even an individual scouting standpoint, like, it's not always about how athletic a guy is. It helps that they're really athletic, but when they have versatility of where they start, the moves they have out of there, it's hard to help when the guy can feed, score both hands, different spots of the field. I think in a lot of lacrosse, you're seeing that versus when we played, where I think guys were much more stationary and static in their spots, especially the top offenses, where I think Notre Dame and Cornell do a really good job of that.
It also takes the defender out of their like kind of natural position as a close defender. It's kind of a different look being up top a little bit more, so you're backpedaling with the cage with the cage behind you, as opposed to like knowing the geometry of the angles you got to take to close out GLE and take those right steps kind of around the cage. You're kind of in no man's land up top. So it's just a different look for the defense. I mean, you can probably speak on it a little bit more as a defender.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think even just like psychologically, most games you're not like, we're going to, if you're Duke and you have Kenny Brower, most games you're not planning to slide to Kenny Brower, because usually you're covering the ball behind the cage. And if you're sliding early to that, you're in trouble. But you will slide your LSM above the cage. But now Kenny Brower's covering above the cage, and you're not ready to, it's just a different psychological, where I think most teams aren't ready to slide to their close defense regularly, like you would against an LSM covering the ball on the high wing. And I think it just changes like the traditional dynamic of how people psychologically feel about defense.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool perspective. It's fun thinking about it from both sides for sure. And it's exciting. I'm pumped for tonight and pumped for the weekend and down the stretch. It's crazy. Like, we spend so much time getting ready for the spring. Then the spring flies by. Now we're in conference tournaments, and next thing you know, it's going to be Memorial Day. It's already May 3rd. So best part of the year for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think guys, we're a little over the hour. We stole enough of Matt's time here. We usually try to keep it to about 60. Has anybody got anything else here for the for the fans? All three of them? Nope. All right. All right. Well, Matt, Tav, I appreciate you taking time to hop on with us. It's always fun to, hear your thoughts, especially with your brothers playing, which is obviously a great lacrosse mind and a ton of success yourself, which we didn't really spend time talking about, but most people
it's all good.
Know who you are.
I like talking about my brothers more than talking about myself. It's more fun. But I appreciate you guys having me on, and you guys are doing a great job. It's fun watching all your content and now being a part of it is even cooler. So best of luck to you guys, and I appreciate you let me hop on and talk lacrosse.
Well, this won't be the last time, that's for sure.
Nah.
And good luck to your brothers in Notre Dame down the stretch. And Matt, awesome chopping it up. And with that, we'll wrap it up, guys, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Cass.
See you guys.
Later, boys. Thank you.